us every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, only on WESN, the content capital.
In this day of stay at home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We'll help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
WESN.
I'm Sean Michael Small. This is Talking Point. We're on WESN, the content capital, television with a difference. Still continuing to strive, even in this difficult landscape, to bring you local content from our team here in our studios in Woodbrook. And I want to maybe pick up where I left off yesterday, because we had a comment. The comment was, on one hand, to do about things that do not directly affect us. On the other hand, they do directly affect us because we can, or perhaps we are involved in various, for lack of a better term, linkages, right? We're not in the Middle East, but the international politics has ties, has linkages, has effects across the world, because this is the phenomenon of the digital age, where communications now and public discourse and news, we all basically know it, right? I'm just kind of trying to formally say it, but in a simplistic way. It has all become into a new realm where participation is different from what it used to be before, where individuals have greater avenues to express feedback. However, at the same time, the sheer volume of channels of distribution, of lines of communication, at times makes it difficult to properly get a overall view about what really the perception is on any given issue. And because of that, some truths remain constant from the past. One of those truths is that it's not always the largest collective whose voices are going to be heard. Sometimes it is because they end up being the loudest, but oftentimes it is the sheer loudest voices, no matter how much of a minority, are the ones who are going to be heard on an issue. Not necessarily just loudest, but also persistent. And at times, shameless. I remember seeing someone selling a CD. In fact, just in Tobago, someone was trying to sell me a movie. You donate to watch a locally produced movie. The problem was, when I kind of saw his little preview, I was like, I don't have time. Part of it was I legitimately did not have time. You know, I was doing my second job. But what struck me was how persistent and basically shameless. He wasn't embarrassed of what he was doing. He was putting his best foot forward. You know, he wasn't going to be ashamed if he was rejected. That I don't think bothered him. And on some level, if you want to sell something, you have to be a little shameless. You don't necessarily want to be too shameless. But you see where some of the narratives are formed by the loudest, the most persistent, and dare I say, the most shameless voices. They don't care what you think of them. On some level, they are basically trying to push their narrative through. And if they are successful, well, then people will just assume them to be correct. And there will be less challenges to their position, less challenges to their point of view, less questions about the authenticity of what they have to say, more assumption that there's nothing to see here, everything's fine, let's just go with this. The comment yesterday is what I'm speaking about, where the commenter was talking about the international politics around Israel. And the fact of the matter is, I don't, believe it or not, I don't necessarily see the situation in Gaza as the most concerning issue on the planet right now. It is a concerning issue. Anything that leads to the loss of life of a large number of people that can be avoided, right? We're not talking about an earthquake that was just so powerful, it negated safety precautions and procedures and building codes and stuff like that. We're talking about a situation where you built weak buildings and people died. We're talking about a situation where it was a human being that made a decision that caused deaths. And was it necessary? And I would argue no, and that's where I would agree with those who are critical of Israel. But it's not so simple to just say, well, because that one no exists, from my perspective, everything now Israel has to be no. And the reason why I say that is not because I like Israel or I want to see Israel triumph, but rather it's the realistic part of my brain. A lot of it comes down to, first of all, what most people perceive as what's going on in the Middle East. It's based on how they perceive it, and a lot of that comes down to the emotional argument. A lot of social issues around the world comes down to an emotional argument, right? I don't know, I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but there was an interesting clip from Joe Rogan's podcast where I can't remember what the background of the speaker was, but he was talking about a situation in Africa where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave out mosquito nets in order to help deal with malaria in an African country. Can't remember which. None of the people use the mosquito nets to protect themselves from mosquitoes. You have a foundation saying we have to do a thing to protect these people. But they took the mosquito nets to fish. And in the process, they didn't just catch fish to eat, but they caught everything because mosquito nets are, the mesh, the holes are so small because you want to keep mosquitoes out. So young fish, baby fish, small organisms in the water that would have been untouched by proper fishing nets are now scooped up, wiped out. Because the population, they are not looking at a need for mosquito nets to help deal with malaria. They're going to deal with malaria however they feel to deal with it. And the fish population, that is a vital component of food security for that region, has basically been decimated because of good intentions. Because you had the emotional appeal of, well, we need to do something about malaria. Congratulations, now there are questions on if this community, if the society is going to have enough food to eat. Emotional arguments are not always the most accurate thing. And I'll go back to the point I made yesterday because it ties into a point that I want to make today about a local situation. Egypt shares a border with Gaza. The emotional argument is that Israel closed the borders with Gaza. Israel closed the borders with Gaza. All right, fine. Very few people question the fact that Egypt also closed its borders with Gaza. I believe protesters tried to go to the Egyptian side of the Gaza border, and the Egyptians were having none of these Western people looking to protest the situation. Because they weren't about to open the border, they weren't about to accept refugees. But the point is, people don't know that because it's how they presented themselves to the world. And this is an unfortunate reality that I think a lot more people need to become aware of. Because yes, we all to some extent understand the cynicism of the real world, but I don't think you fully appreciate what that cynicism is. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to nation states, and you see, we know this for the countries that we dislike, for the leaders that we hate. We don't consider the fact that this is practiced mostly across the board, because if it works, why are you going to not do it? The Middle East presents a version of itself to the public. That does not mean that what they publicly say is 100% in line with what they actually do. It does not have to be. What you say does not have to be what you mean or what your intentions are, unfortunately. Every now and then, I think the international community and the international press gets caught into that trap trying to analyze what President Trump says. He's a negotiator. He's accustomed to starting with some tall ask because he expects to be negotiated down. I'm not saying that's what it is in every situation, but I think there have been times when that seems to be true. But we have an international press that's basically saying, look at him, he's being unreasonable. Yeah, he's starting off unreasonable because he doesn't want to start off reasonable and then be negotiated down to something less practical. Now, is that the best way to do it? Is that the right way to do it? There are arguments for yes and no. But the point is, what he intends is not necessarily always what he says. Does he want Greenland? Yes. Is he going to invade and just take it? Probably not. But he's trying to express that he really, really wants the strategic piece of real estate. Not necessarily the most effective way to try to get it, but c'est la vie. It is what it is. If you think about things from a strategic perspective, and I know this is another contentious issue, but what's going on with Diego Garcia basically as an incentive for America to say, we're not going to lease a base anymore. Because all we need is the internal politics of the host nation to mess us up and mess up the entire strategic position. And you need to understand something. If America loses Diego Garcia, then there is a greater chance for wider conflict in South Asia and Southeast Asia and East Africa. It just is. Now, you might say, oh, well, I don't care much for American intervention. Tell that to the countries that depend on America for their security. So, I think part of it now is we assume that our side is the good side and their side is the bad side. And one of the issues is we don't question our side. And we don't analyze the other side with any degree of objectivity because we're too caught up in emotional arguments. I might use a certain level of sarcasm. I might display a certain level of frustration or anger. But it's only after looking at what is going on And then how do I feel about the analysis, not about the initial accusation. I'm a critic of the government, but when you have people saying, don't build anything in Savannah because they want to put up a structure for the Independence Day parade opposite the President's house, this is not an issue for me to speak about. The structure looks temporary. I didn't notice concrete going down. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I saw it. We've seen temporary structures be erected at various points around the Savannah, not just the North Stand, which seemingly now is not temporary, and that might cause a whole other kit and caboodle. But I'm fine with it because anything around the paddock, the grandstand, to me, that I'm not treating that land as sacred as the rest of the Savannah. I don't necessarily want to see the entire thing paved over, but if the grandstand stays, remember, one of the costs of erecting and disassembling and then erecting again the North Stand was the fact that some of the steel went missing. And it wasn't cheap, the amount of lost steel. We just couldn't find it, apparently. So I'm not looking to pick a fight with the government over every little thing. If they start putting down concrete and building a permanent structure right opposite President's house, that's different because I know those areas are utilized as fields for various sporting activities. They're utilized by members of the public. Now, the temporary structure is in the way, but I don't know to what degree teams would necessarily be utilizing that space in August. And a temporary displacement can't necessarily kick up that big of a fuss. It might inconvenience some people, but it is what it is. This is not something for me to just be upset about just because the UNC did it. We are getting too caught up in perceptions because we're allowing people who don't want to help the Palestinians at all tell us that you need to do something to help the Palestinians. And I'm not saying that Israel, again, is right. Technically, I'm also not saying that they're wrong. I think that whole situation is far more complex than most people in Trinidad and Tobago give it credit for. And we try to oversimplify, oh, well, it's about human life, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Hamas was killing Israelis. Now, if you want to say that it's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, on some level, oh, so it's fine that they killed 10 because Israel killed 1,000? Technically speaking, Israel could be more wrong. That doesn't make Hamas right. That's the difference. I'm not saying Israel is of the same moral equivalency when it comes to the amount of people killed. No, you might consider that Israel is more wrong. Doesn't make Hamas right. Less wrong is technically still wrong. We see this phenomenon in our own politics, right? Where we justify supporting what is potentially poor behavior by our politicians because we say, well, the other side was worse. The other side being worse doesn't mean that your side is good. Your side could still be bad. Less worse is still bad. But we play these semantic games and these, we straddle the borderline of reason when it comes to how we perceive things to try to justify poor performance. Now, one of the things that I should say up front is, when I say that this government is worse than the previous one, that is, to be fair to them and their supporters, a generalization and an oversimplification. Because I can't say that across the board, on every issue, on every metric, this government is worse than the previous government. I am taking a shortcut, and maybe I shouldn't. At the very least, in terms of communications, I believe this government is worse. When it comes to the economy, I think to some extent this government is worse. that doesn't mean that the previous administration was doing great things for the economy or doing great things with communication. Just because they are less worse doesn't mean that it was good. That's what people also need to understand. When I say something is worse, it doesn't mean that I'm rubber stamping what came before. It doesn't mean I'm rubber stamping the other side. It doesn't mean I'm saying, oh, well, you know what, we should go back to them because they were okay by comparison. No, by comparison, they might be better. Doesn't mean it was good enough. Because what's happening is we're not necessarily assessing things accurately. And to be honest, when it comes to our voting patterns, we are mostly very lazy. That's why we have so many recycled politicians. Basically, politicians who have failed that are still allowed to keep senior positions because there is no demand to replace them, because we think, we'll just go with the other party. But the other party somehow never learns the lessons of their predecessors. And they make similar mistakes. They do similar things. Because the we time mentality is more widespread than we would like to admit. And no offense, anybody that uses the word it's we time, what you're telling me is your allegiance is not to Trinidad and Tobago, your allegiance is to whatever faction you're a part of. And while I'm not necessarily going to dismiss your opinion out of hand, on a personal level, I don't expect us to see eye to eye on much. I have no political allegiance, more on that later on in the show. I have no political allegiance that's going to override whatever sense of individual civic responsibility I have for my country and for my citizens. If I see something going bad in a UNC area or a PNM area, it's all the same. Those are Trinbagonians who are suffering. Trinidad or Tobago, north, south, central, east, west. The emblem on your shirt, the color that you wear, means nothing to me. But we don't have that sense of national identity. We break ourselves up. It's easy to blame the former colonial masters. No offense, we're a republic. We didn't even keep the monarch as our head of state, which on a practical level might not be as serviceable as we thought. But we went full independent. Full independent. So at what point, the historical this and the historical that. I didn't realize that we were slaves to habits that we are not capable enough to break. I thought we were greater than that. I thought we had more capacity to that. We have shown international excellence in various avenues, from the oil and gas sector, to the arts, to sport. We are psychologically still enslaved by our colonial circumstances after achieving full independence. I didn't realize that the oil and gas money wasn't taken by corrupt government officials of our country. I didn't realize that the colonial masters took it. Our issues, we want to find excuses all over the place because emotionally it makes us feel better. When the reality is, if we want to take charge of our own destiny, we need to do just that. And that doesn't mean handing off the responsibility to a recycled politician who's going to default back to their normal capacity, their normal judgment, their normal personality, their normal line of behavior. And with that said, that is what makes the Prime Minister's communication somewhat concerning, because it seemingly is away from her baseline, which leaves certain people with a lot of questions: who's speaking for her? We don't know. I'll say this: the one thing I never said about Dr. Keith Rowley was that someone was speaking for him. Oh, no, 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 no. He spoke for himself, whether you liked it or not. And there were times when it would have been better if he didn't. But the fact of the matter is he did. Now, don't necessarily always like what he had to say, but just on the sheer fact that he was willing to put himself front and center with whatever it is he wanted to say. It came from him. You have to respect that a little bit. Doesn't mean that that overrides your criticisms of him. But he faced the fire. Maybe not as much as he should, probably not as much as he should, probably should have had more press conferences, be willing to take more questions from the media, but the point of the matter is he still did it. Doesn't mean that it was good enough, just because it was better than, but it is what it is. It was what it was. How do we perceive our politics? Because now, let's transition to the story that got me thinking along these lines. In Tobago, there is a conversation, I would say, over slogan. The slogan comes from the TPP, its political leader and current Chief Secretary, Farley Augustine. The greatest little island on the planet. There's a mural of this on the new airport. And now, apparently, there's a debate about whether the slogan is a Tobago slogan or a TPP political slogan. I find that interesting. One of the situations that the Secretary of Tourism is pointing to is the watchwords of Dr. Eric Williams, discipline, tolerance, and production, which is now the national watchwords, which every time I see it or someone brings it up or says it, I find it very ironic because this is Trinidad and Tobago. Discipline, tolerance, and production, I don't really think we follow those watchwords, to be honest. We have individuals who do it, but as a society, discipline, we have people complaining about how we are a lawless society. We do not enforce law and order. You give Trinis an inch, you give Tobagonians an inch, they take a mile. Tolerance, have you seen the political landscape? Production, where's that? But it's interesting, is this a slogan for the TPP to advance Tobago, or is this a slogan to market Tobago to the world? One of the unfortunate things is, while I want to believe it is the latter, given the fact that we have not necessarily seen any significant attempts to market either the country or Tobago, I am left to think that it is a political slogan by default. Not that it is the intention of the Chief Secretary for it to be a political slogan, but given the fact that there's no action on it, that perception, I could understand why it exists. Now, here comes the difficult question. Because obviously, if it's just marketing for Tobago, should the country do that? Or should Tobago itself only do that with their budget? And then you have to ask, is their budget good enough? And to be honest, I don't necessarily see why it has to be split. There should be a proper tourism agency or state entity. We have never had one, just by the way. The proof is in the results. We have never had one. I'm willing to state that, right? The Division of Tourism for the THA should work with this national entity, who will potentially be more readily able to access the national budget to market the country. And then you will have marketing for Trinidad and Tobago, and underneath that you will have subcategories of marketing for the various aspects of Trinidad and the various aspects of Tobago. Because why separate the two? Our advantage is we have two distinct experiences that you could participate in. And for international travelers who are spending a significant amount of money just to fly here, taking a ferry or taking a plane between the islands is not that big of a deal for them to be able to experience a more diverse Caribbean social, cultural experience. And we should market that. And then there, of course, there are natural attractions on both islands, which, you know, why separate them, add them together? There's more to see, there's more to do. But the sad reality is we're not really seeing marketing. What we're seeing is, well, we want to build things and expect people to come. We build hotels and they will come. We build airports and they will come. And yet they're not coming. Because we don't actually know what we're doing with regards to a tourism product. So when the Chief Secretary comes and he now wants to make Tobago the greatest little island on the planet, what's going to turn that from a political slogan to an actual slogan for Tobago is, what are you actually doing to accomplish that? At the very least, you could say that with regards to the watchwords of the nation, on some level, we had to display this for our oil and gas sector to flourish. We had to display this at times in certain parts of society. We're not always successful, but we had to implement things, particularly with regards to discipline and production. We successfully did it. We successfully accomplished things at times in our nation's history. For Tobago to be the greatest little island, we have to actually see things being done to move it towards that direction. But then part of it is exactly how do you define the greatest little island of Tobago? Sorry, the greatest little island on the planet. What are you doing for that? How do you get there? Is it with regards to tourism? We're the greatest little island and we're going to show off everything our beautiful island has to offer? Is it regards to building up a small island economy? A small island society? Is it a combination of both? Now, to be fair to the Chief Sec, his latest political move to align himself with the new government is technically by default the only move he could have made. The previous government was the party that was his political opponents, and the working relationship, while at times showed promise, I think ultimately broke down. Now, to what extent did he have a part to play on that? That could be a separate debate. So he is aligned with the new government, but is he able to accomplish everything he wants to? Part of the ball and chain holding everything back is not what central government wants to do, but just rather the economic reality we find ourselves in. And I keep saying, though the budget does not show this, if we want something to be pushed more, we probably have to sacrifice in other areas of national expenditure. And for the most part, with regards to budgets, particularly under the PNM, we just got more of the same, to sustain, to maintain what is already there. Don't really want to make big waves. Now, on some level, you could argue the UNC is moving the money around a little bit more, but we're not really seeing any significant, this is the goal, this is the plan, this is what we're aggressively going to push. Rather, we're seeing things being pushed, but it's more behind the scenes and seemingly more political and not so much economically sustainable. And unfortunately, that means that the pie will never grow, so the amount that could be allocated to Tobago might just not be sufficient if you have grand ambitions. one of the things where you can start off is doing everything you can to facilitate the private sector to then help facilitate Tobago's economy. But the way how it's being done doesn't seem to be that effective. And because of that, it comes back down to the fact that the slogan is coming across, unfortunately, as more political than, can't necessarily say national, but more political than, say, for the island, right? The chairman of the Tobago arm of the TNT Chamber of Industry and Commerce, he is saying, look, there are more pressing issues than this. But then on some level, I think the issues that he's talking about is pointing to why the greatest little island is premature. He's saying that if these issues are not being addressed, then Tobago can't be the greatest little island on the planet. And in part, this goes back to the budget, where service providers of the THA are being paid, according to one of his statements, 10 to 11 months after they provided said services. And then goes on to say that, look, this is why things for the THA are always at a little bit of a higher price. Because when you're getting your money 10 to 11 months, maybe a year after you provided a service, in theory, inflation, although right now I believe inflation is low, but in theory, even low inflation is still inflation, number one. And inflation would basically depreciate the value of the money that the contract is worth if you don't get the money now. The purchasing power of a dollar right now is technically not equal to the purchasing power of a dollar a year from now. A year from now, it will technically be less. By some extent, just the cost of chicken situation is an example of it. Whenever we have shortages, and that might lead to higher prices and so on and so on. Williams said Tobago's priority should remain focused on the issues affecting residents and the island's economy. We want to put rooms, heads in beds. We're supposed to look at what our accommodation looks like on the island, because right now it's not feasible for tourists. It's totally not feasible for tourists on some level. While I wouldn't say it's totally not feasible, I agree with his sentiments, generally speaking. We had the challenges that we were having with water, and now we are seeing some of that being addressed. But those are some of the fundamental things that we should be concerned about and put in our priorities instead of a sign at this present moment. And by wanting to put the sign, you're potentially putting the cart before the horse. And again, that suggests political. I understand faking it till you make it, but the making it part seems to be way far off in the distance. One of the things a taxi driver, you know, I had to take a taxi to go into town one day. Vehicle wasn't up. And one of the things that he mentioned was he had a tourist, a potential investor. And one of the complaints was just how dark Tobago was. Just the lack of street lights in certain areas. And it made it look a certain way. Certain parts of Crown Point where you have the older hotels, the more established hotels, it could be pretty dark on the public road at night. And because of that, the movement of tourists could be sketchy. It's not like how we would want it to be if you want to have a certain amount of nightlife and entertainment. It doesn't have to go on for too late, but still. Things like that. Things like traffic issues. But things are easy to say, it's harder to implement. So, on some level, the reason why the slogan comes off for some as political is because it's making an emotional appeal to Tobagonians. Here we are trying to make Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. But you have to juxtapose that with the reality. How practical is it? Are you getting where you intend to go? I would argue that for various reasons, the answer to that question right now is no. Now, some of it is outside of the THA's control. But case in point, this was put up on a new airport. I know on some level that is also outside of their control, but the whole new airport in of itself, while it might be grander than the old one, outside of facilitating appearances, what value is it bringing to the island of Tobago to propel it to be the greatest little island on the planet? And more importantly, you're emotionally appealing to the people of Tobago with this slogan. It's not going out to tourists. It's not going out in a marketing campaign, so it has to be internal, hence why it's political. And yet we don't necessarily see all of the people of Tobago fully understanding that at the end of the day, the gravy train, the days of easy life when the oil and gas revenue would trickle down to the THA, who will then just spread it around to the 88% of the population that has THA jobs, those days are probably over. What we have are politicians reluctant to make the necessary adjustments because they don't necessarily want to have to deal with the fallout. What it means is that people are going to have to work and not just get a government job where they may or may not show up, but work, be productive, probably in the private sector, to add to the economy, to help grow the GDP, to help circulate liquid resources by participating in the economy. And that requires the watchwords: discipline, tolerance, production, discipline to work hard, tolerance of potentially migrants or transplants from Trinidad who are here to work and who are willing to integrate into society that welcomes them, and at times they are welcome and at times they are not. And production, actually outputting work, actually showing productivity, and not just wanting to collect a check. I have no issue with Tobago trying to be the greatest little island on the planet. There are many things Trinidad could learn from Tobago. But Tobago has its own challenges, and more importantly, it needs to learn some of its own harsh lessons to pull itself out of the situation it now finds itself in, which is not totally its own fault, but on some level, the younger generations, they did opt into with eyes wide open, and no one, apparently, on an island-wide level, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, was attempting to tell them, hold on, if we do this, we are setting ourselves up for failure in the future. All because of perception. Let's take the comment now. I don't necessarily rehash this. Good day. You can try to show a balance here on your arguments, but the final analysis is there's only one side to take when genocide is being committed. Moreover, to blame neighboring countries for taking refugees, no, for not taking refugees. They're not taking refugees. If you thought I was blaming them for taking refugees, that means that you're not listening to what I'm saying. And if that's not the case, that means that you need to be more accurate with what you're typing. 700,000 Palestinians, when? Because I know Egypt's border remained closed, and I know that when they did take in Palestinians in the past, they regretted it. I never said that what Israel is doing is fine. You're saying there's only one side to take. Why? Why is there only one side to take in this situation? The side you're taking, you're assuming the bigger number of deaths makes one side the victim. The problem is they started the killing. They are an active and willing participant in a conflict that has lasted for generations. more often than not, they initiate the violence. Israel might provoke with all kinds of unethical behaviors, but more often than not, Hamas initiates the violence. And you have been convinced that it's fine. Because Hamas kills less people, therefore they are good. And again, I don't say Palestinians initiate the violence, right? But it is what it is. This was reported in the news repeatedly. The 700,000 Palestinians, if it was recent, it was very recent, but it wasn't in the midst of when Israel was front page of all international headlines bombing Gaza. Because they had no way to get to the other countries. Israel closed the borders and Egypt closed the borders, and that was it. They physically couldn't leave. That was the whole point. So I don't know where you got the 700,000 number from. Maybe I missed something in the news. But for quite some time, when it seemed as though Israel apparently was committing genocide, Egypt was like, that's fine, but you all will stay right there. And my point is, the side that you want to take does not exist. The side that you want to champion does not exist. The form that you think it exists in does not exist. The values and the morality that you think they have does not exist. They're a side, yes. They're a party to the situation, sure. They are physically in existence, yes. But how you view them and what moral justification you view them or you appropriate to them, that's not how it is. So I'm not trying to show balance in this issue. I'm trying to show reality. The reality is it's ugly across the board. One side might be more ugly than the other side, but it is what it is. If you want to think that one side is the side of truth, justice, and whatever moral way that you consider to be principled, I have some bad news for you. The politics in that region is far more uglier than you think. And that's my problem. You're taking it for granted. If one side is perceived as doing the wrong thing, the other side must be right. In this case, I'll say this, the Palestinians, to some extent, are just caught in the middle of a war that they may or may not have wanted. It's not entirely clear for me, because I do believe they did vote for Hamas. Now, to what extent was that coercion by the threat of violence, and to what extent was that legitimate? So, because listen, you could have the sons of former IDF generals saying Israel is evil, then you have the sons of former Hamas leadership saying Hamas is evil. You could go round and round in circles with emotional appeal. I know the facts. The facts is Egypt closed the border. So I don't know where 700,000 people left Gaza currently. So yeah. Is it ethnic cleansing? Maybe. But here's the thing about the Zionist objective potentially being ethnic cleansing. You should not be concerned about if it's ethnic cleansing. You should be concerned about why they might be doing it. Because then that speaks to escalation. It speaks to escalation, which is not limited only to Israel. It's not as though Israel is some special evil, and if we just eliminate them as a problem, we will never see this again. No. The irony, of course, that people have looked to bitterly is that the Jews were victims of ethnic cleansing. Now, they're not the only race in modern times to be victims of ethnic cleansing, but the fact of the matter is the nation of Israel was founded as a result in a response to an act of genocide. And now it seems as though they're willing, not necessarily, and this is the thing, is it genocide? Are they wiping out all Palestinians? I'm not even sure if Palestinians is technically a race. Wiping out a country, I don't believe is, so to say, genocide, but people could debate the semantics. The fact of the matter is they're doing something that looks like the villain that inflicted upon them. Not quite the same. It's not quite the same degree. They don't have trains and gas chambers, but effectively, it's along those lines. That is the perception of some people. So now the question is why? And the sad reality is the why is very ugly, multifaceted, and has a lot of people involved. A lot of people to take the blame. And it's not just Israelis. Although, make no mistake, I never agreed with what the IDF is doing. I found it to be militarily ridiculous, counterproductive, and unethical. But they're not the only ones responsible for what's going on. That's not how the world works. Life does not present us the good guys and bad guys like in movies. And then there are a lot of movies where there are no good guys. And those movies, usually, that's the message that the writer, the director, the actors are trying to convey. Not every time is there going to be a good guy. There might be victims. That doesn't necessarily mean, however, that the fighters of one side or the other has to be heroes. This is human nature. We didn't all of a sudden become violent. We were always violent. We were always like this. It's just that now, when we no longer regularly enrich ourselves by conquering our neighbors, any act of violence on a national versus national level is more stark, it's more concerning, it's more distressing. But make no mistake, man has done worse to man throughout history. So it's not that it's happening, but it's why. And the why is very ugly and concerning because the why is very human. And the why, with enough effort and under the right circumstances, can happen anywhere, including here. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'll get into some stories of the day. Things that just minor things to point out. And then we'll open the phone lines. This is talking about the WSN Content Capital. We'll be right back after this.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We'll help you find that rental to rest along the way or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Welcome back to Talking Points. And while I spoke about the ugliness of international politics, because that's what it is really, the whole situation between Israel and Palestine is an ugly display of various international politics, international activists, and local politicians and activists who are trying to take advantage, in a lot of cases, of that issue to then translate that into some sort of agenda locally, right? Trying to rile up support against a politician to topple them or to change your nation's direction, and in doing so, potentially distancing them or creating friction because the Zionist agenda is tied to America, and of course, we are seemingly aligned with both America and Israel. So on some level, I'm not saying that is the case for a lot of the common citizens here who have these opinions, but for political activists, their goal might be to try to sunder those ties, particularly, of course, with Israel, because now you have the emotional side of it. Some people might not like that we have dealings with them and so on and so on. I was part of an interview on AM Prime. It was 3 of us with a Palestinian activist. He was very careful with what he said, and I appreciated the consideration he had, because he was not trying to adjudicate things on the level that a lot of people are trying to adjudicate it. He was merely there to advocate for Palestinians, not to justify Hamas or anything like that. And you could tell that he was aware that the situation was not as cookie cutter, well, our side good, their side evil, this is simple. No, he was aware of the complexities. I didn't necessarily want to put him on the spot any moment to go further along those lines. I wanted him to get his message out. His message was, let's help the people. Let's do that. He was being loyal to his nation, to his people, to his society. Whereas now locally, I think we allow ourselves to tolerate this, despite the fact that it has been exposed time and time again, and to some extent, our population actually agrees, not just tolerates, but potentially encourages this type of behavior. And it's to do with the fact that when I say allegiance to the Republic and to each other, it is supposed to be that first. Whatever group, subgroup of Trinidad and Tobago that you want to be a part of should come after. I mean, to be fair, it should be humanity first, your nation second, but humanity is kind of a given, right? You know, you're not necessarily loyal to humanity in quite that way. And there are times when, look, every nation has to seek its own interests on its own. But now, ironically, you have a situation in labor that is continuing to bubble. It hasn't necessarily exploded. It is growing. I'm interested to see where it might lead to. It might lead to nowhere. But I spoke about this yesterday. Trade union leaders, there was a call from the head of the Communication Workers Union to put aside political loyalties, right, and to side up for workers, for labor. Now, on some level, the call of the individual is to deal with labor, but I think it exposes the fact that we are too comfortable with people basically declaring that their political allegiance, that their loyalty to the party, that their political loyalty is above all else. The irony of this is, given the fact that the Prime Minister basically scolded CARICOM, saying about how we're a free democratic society, Cuba is not, therefore we're better, therefore don't judge me for my stance on Cuba. The irony, of course, is political loyalty at times is a mechanism that is the basis of propping up a communist dictatorship. The Soviet Union had political officers in their military whose job was not to be a military officer, not to be a leader, not to be a tactician, not to be an operational specialist, but whose job was to monitor military officers and soldiers for their political loyalty to the Communist Party. And one could debate when you have government swapping out, now those who were politically loyal to the new regime get rewarded, those who were loyal to the previous regime, they kind of get kicked to the curb, kicked to the wayside. And we kind of know this, we tolerate this, we even to some extent applaud this, expect this, encourage this, because when we hear about, oh, this parliamentarian did cross the floor or didn't want to vote with the party, they're disloyal, they are not the representative of the political party. They're the representative, yes, of the party, but for a constituency with constituents who they are technically supposed to represent. But the party line is not always in the best interest of every constituency. But they still have to follow the party line, not the will of their constituents. And dare I say, debate on the concerns of constituents doesn't exist. We might as well just take out the constituency names and just put their own names and just MP so-and-so, that's it. Why do we bother with MP for Superior, or MP for Digger Martin North, or MP of anywhere? You don't act, those are the people who voted for you. That doesn't mean that you represent them. So this call by labor, by a labor union leader, speaks to a wider issue, because similar to politicians come from our society, police officers and criminals come from our society, labor unions, their membership, their leaders come from our society. How they act, how they all act, behave, what rules they break, what rules they don't break, what ethics they uphold, what ethics they lack, that all comes from society. Our society is one where political allegiances is above all else. And we know this to be true. We witness it. We find it understandable. We tolerate it. And we encourage it. When a party has dissidents, the dissidents lose all support. And the independent voters, the voters in the middle, they don't bother with the dissidents. That's the funny thing. It's one thing for the diehard supporters to say, hey, you went against the leader, we're not supporting you. But there are large volumes of voters in the middle that basically, they don't care. They don't care if anyone, I'm not saying that all dissidents are standing on principle, but the law of averages says They can't all be grifters. And the voting public who are in the middle, who are undecided voters, independent voters, not diehard supporters, they and all do not care. And that tells the politicians that the only way to have a political career is to be loyal to the party. And then what happens? There is no longer loyalty to the country. There's no longer what's best for the country. There's only what's best for the party. Now, this is where things get interesting, because in the previous topic of conversation, I said the sides between issues like Israel and Palestine are not as simple, where you could just, oh, well, Israel's killing more people, therefore the other side is the side of the angels. That's the side I'm on. I'm on no side on that issue, by the way. That conflict has been going on for generations. At this point, it is in its modern iteration at least 100 years old. They have had violence before Israel was even formulated, before Palestine was even formulated. And you could have the debate on who was on the land first. And just because some people have a modern deed, right, essentially take that argument with the Native Americans. They never had a deed. So it is what it is. When you want to go to oversimplify the moralistic debate of these things, conquest was something that was done ad nauseum throughout human history, right? But anyway, that is different to this. But here's how it's different, but yet the same. I am saying national identity, loyalty to one's nation, loyalty to all citizens of said nation, consideration and concern for all citizens of said nation, should trump, no pun intended if anyone thinks that there was one, should trump political allegiances. If that is our starting point, then it would be a lot harder for political entities to be corrupt. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would say it's harder. Now, the Communication Workers Union Secretary General made this call for greater unity amongst trade unions. That doesn't necessarily mean that such a call is going to advance a national agenda, but it's a basic thing to be fair to the unions, right? Labor right now is fractured, and you're seeing unequal treatment. The Nursing Association has basically put itself forward as an example. They did not join the coalition of interests, and they are continuing to suffer. I use the words continuing. I don't think Edie Stewart used the words continuing, right? He just said that they have been negatively affected, basically because they remained politically non-aligned. And to be fair, this is what unions should be doing. You should be politically unaligned. But the political system that we have has convinced unions at times, no, you need to support the opposition. Except when the opposition comes into government, the reality kind of slaps you in the face. Right? Edie Stewart says the Nursing Association has deliberately avoided political alignment, allowing it to engage whichever party is in government while retaining the freedom to challenge policies affecting its members. TPP can't challenge nothing in central government right now, just to point it out. I'm not faulting them for getting a relationship with the UNC government. I'm just saying they can't challenge certain things right now. The commentary from the Chief Secretary, all the fire and brimstone, that's done. But to say that the lives of Tobagonians have significantly improved, that there is no longer a need for improvement, as Curtis Williams pointed out, that is not so. Head of the TNT Chamber, Tobago chapter of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. He said unions that align themselves with political parties risk losing that independence. Quote, it comes with the risk that you would not be able to speak out. It comes with risk that you would not want to alienate that political party. More on that in a bit. Stewart said the risks are no longer theoretical. Quote, unions who did not toe the line and still continue to refuse to toe the line or continue to speak out on issues would be negatively affected. I could even say, in the best interest of my own union, I have decided not even to go back up for re-election. We have elections coming up in September, and I believe that my union currently is being victimized in a number of ways because we did not openly support any political party. He went on to describe the current political environment as treacherous for unions that remain politically independent. Why? We can't allow you to be politically independent. You have to be a good boy or girl and get in line. Now, the Postal Workers General Secretary, this is how it's described. I would not describe it this way, but this is how the article describes it. And I guess on some level, I understand why. The General Secretary of the Postal Workers Union has taken a more cautious approach, saying he cannot speak on behalf of other unions and does not want to be drawn into the political dimensions of the Communication Workers Union's comments. Here's the thing, though, what I find interesting. Yes, I understand that it's cautious because human psychology says, I don't want to comment, I want to wait and see, I want to be cautious, I don't want to pick a side. But the reality is, in certain social dynamics, not picking a side is picking a side. Because if you didn't want to necessarily comment on what Mr. Stewart was saying, I understand that that could have repercussions, although doesn't necessarily still make it right. But what the Secretary General of the Communications Workers Union, OJIR, is saying is, we need to put aside political loyalties where unions or loyalty is supposed to be for the labor movement first. And the Postal Workers Union General Secretary is basically saying, I don't want to be drawn into that. Not being drawn into that basically means you are implying support for unions putting political allegiances above the labor movement. That's how it comes across. It might not be an intentional decision, but that's effectively what that statement says. You can't not be involved in the political dimension of OJIR's comments. There is no middle ground. Because by saying nothing, you imply support for what she's speaking out against. Unlike the situation with Israel-Palestine, where you're a third party, I'm a third party, TNT is a third party, you're a labor leader. And she's talking about loyalties to a political party, that is the government that we are technically negotiating with, that is sitting at the other side of the negotiating table. You are directly involved. To say that you don't want to be drawn into the political dimension, the fact of the matter is, and it went on to say, Mr. David Forbes, I believe, went on to say, labor leaders, he went on to defend, this is the report, defend the involvement of trade union leaders in politics, arguing that this relationship is not new. If that's the case, why are you concerned about joining with or being drawn into the political dimension of a labor union's comments, a labor union leader's comments? When you're acknowledging the fact that the labor movement has been political, has operated within the political environment. And he uses the PSA being part of the coalition of interests as an example of things being fine, for lack of a, basically speaking. The thing is, they're being treated differently than the Nursing Association because they are politically loyal. Part of it, however, is the fact that the PSA is on some level kind of playing both sides in a way. They will protest or threaten protest, and then the government has to figure out a way to get them to stop protesting, because if the PSA falls out with the government, then the whole narrative that the government has structured around how they are treating with labor will fall apart. So they're a special circumstance, and other unions don't qualify for that special circumstance. They also have a former leader as the Minister of Labor itself. And you could tell Felicia Thomas did not come out and say the same things that Joanne Ogier said about her former union leader. But to say that that is something that other unions could put into practice, no. And you have various other situations with the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Union, etc., who are calling for their back pay and so forth and so forth. Hell, the PSA is technically debating or still has two contentious issues with the government, and they're part of the coalition of interest. One is negotiations for periods that still have not been settled yet, and the other one is still the back pay. So to say that you don't want to be drawn into the political dimension, and this is the thing, we are not directly involved with Israel and Palestine, right? We're not. Nor do we have the capacity to affect it in any meaningful way. I have already said months ago, probably sometime last year, that the militaries of the world should have directly intervened. If you are serious about stopping the idea from killing Palestinians, you can't just send strongly worded letters and have meetings in the UN and conduct peace talks. You have to physically prevent the violence. Because action speaks louder than words. And Israel and Hamas knows that no one is going to stop them. They're going to continue to fight and kill each other. The end. And it's going to be a Hatfields and McCoy, and nothing's going to stop it until both sides are dead, one side is dead, whatever. And if you don't like that, if you want to prevent that, then someone has to do something about it. Strongly worded letters and diplomatic communiques and protests on countries half a world away ain't stopping people that hate each other to that extent. But this is different. This is our country now. Now, the thing is, there are two dimensions to this. There is the political party versus political party, and then there is the political system versus those who view the system as something that has far and away gone out of control. Because I would argue the two sides of our government, PNM and UNC, I could argue if you don't want to pick a side there, I understand that. Because it's similar to Israel-Palestine. You don't want to pick us. I don't want to pick a side there because I think both sides in their own ways are ridiculous, unethical, misleading. And with regards to our politicians, they have deficiencies, both sides. I am not content with either side. I don't want to pick one of those sides. Like Israel and Palestine, I said we need intervention. We need something outside of the normal equation of Israel versus Palestine. That's it. We need something else to come and enter into the equation to prevent the ongoing deaths. Because just asking them formally ain't gonna cut it. And I believe what Joanne Ogier is basically doing is something to that extent. She's calling for unions to basically do what Edie Stewart did, despite the fact that he's saying that our independence is costing us. But if you concede it, if you just say, look what happened to the Nursing Association, we don't want to do that, we're going to play ball. That's how these things work. That's the whole point of a union. A union is to unify the members of an organization, the employees, so that the employer cannot victimize them. Now, basically, Joanne Ogier is basically calling all unions to basically utilize those same principles with regards to how they treat the labor movement and how they engage with political entities. And I'm going a step further. I'm not limiting it to labor. I'm saying, as citizens, we need to look at the status quo, not just this party is bad or that party is bad. But we need to look at the status quo because we've allowed the status quo to be the tail wagging the dog. And things have gone out of control. We might not necessarily see results that are so bad that it's undeniable, but they are out of control. And instead of doing something about it, we're debating which party is the better party, which is ridiculous. Which is why Mr. San Fernando called in a couple of weeks ago and basically said he already looking forward, or rather is not necessarily looking forward to the next election because he is back to square one. Who do I vote for? And that's why we had comments this week and last week about who's for which side and who's being a hater and it's we time now and all of that crap. But that's why I said, who are you loyal to? Country first or party first? Be real with yourself. I ain't asking you to tell nobody. I ain't asking you to say it publicly. I ain't asking you to have a conversation with your friends or your family. I'm asking you to be real with yourself and justify to yourself, if your allegiance is to a political party, why that is correct. Why that is ethical, morally just and right. Listen, UNCPNM, our international stance wouldn't be that much different, to be honest. Let's just get that out of the way, right? So, our alignment to Israel, our utilization of their services, our alignment to America, our formal political and economic trade relationships with them, on some level that would exist regardless of PNM and UNC. Our domestic situation is all on us. It's to do with us. There might be foreign money facilitating a lot of the political bacchanal. There is that allegation, claim made about American politics and other places. It's not impossible. But at the end of the day, that only has power if we, the people, gives it power. I find it on some level ridiculous that a union leader could call for unions to put aside political loyalties and to stand up for the labor movement in general. And you actually have another union leader basically saying, I don't want to get, I, as a labor union leader, who is part of something that has already been, by my own words, involved in politics, don't want to get involved in the political dimension of what you're saying. That's ridiculous. Because what's that saying? What that's exposing is, I am actually tolerant of this status quo. And I believe that the country more or less is fine with labor, who is supposed to be negotiating with government, who are on the other side of the negotiating table with government, and even the PSA is not buddy-buddy kumbaya 24/7 with the current administration. Let's make that clear. I'm fine with it. I'm a labor union. I'm fine with the implication that labor unions have political loyalties. Because then if you have political loyalties, do you know what suffers? The duty of care you have to your members, who may or may not appreciate it, who may or may not understand it, but you cannot have two masters. One mountain cannot have two tigers. A union cannot service the needs of its members, I didn't say once, the needs of its members and the requirements of its political overlords. Labor and government do not run parallel. Their agendas will diverge, even if you're in a coalition of interests. And that's just one aspect. This one aspect is exposing the fact that we are too tolerant with people who put political loyalty above country, political party above country. And we all know it, and we all complain about it, and we do nothing about it. And then when the time comes, oh, look the dissidents. And we laugh at them, and we say what a waste of time they are. But essentially, what does that say? It says that we tolerate political dictatorship. Because that's what the parties, that's how they're run. That's how they're run. Stuart Young was prime minister because Dr. Keith Rowley remained political leader and essentially did everything he could. Yes, there were votes, but he did everything he could to force the situation through. Now, we will never know if he could have maintained the status quo with just his position as political leader, because they lost the election and it made the whole situation untenable. But essentially, political parties are not democracies. Let's make that very clear. They are dictatorships. You don't win an election because you're the more beloved candidate. You win the election because you're in charge, and no one dare step out of line. Dr. Rowley only became political leader because Mr. Manning was undermined on a national level, and some of his supporters turned on him because of it. Some of the very same people who make up party executives right now. The Prime Minister says how she got rid of nepotism in the UNC, and yet arguably treats the UNC as her, well, Watson Duke basically, he formally declared ownership of the PDP. Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar essentially treats the UNC as her faction, not the faction she leads, not the political party she leads, but it's her party. There's no dissent. No. So, are we going to continue to tolerate this? And the thing is, and this is where I get a bit more subtle in what I have to say, I still believe that if we, the people, took our responsibilities more seriously and engaged in the political process more holistically, and not just waited every 5 years, then we vote, then we complain for 5 years, then we vote. Because a lot of times the complaints are a lot of hot air that amount to nothing. So they're not going to listen to you until the end, but by then it's too late and you're ready to vote them out of office. That is not a healthy way to be. And if we don't want to engage with the politicians, and yes, to be fair, they don't want to engage with us when they're ready. But we tolerate that too much. We don't reward the politicians for doing the right thing. We just judge them based on their party. Everything, the political process is about party. Party, 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 party. So we end up in this mess where we don't even say, oh, I like this guy, I don't like this person, and we try to get, okay, who is the best out of the bunch? Just because you have a Balize or a Rising Sun on your shirt doesn't mean you're the best option. One of the ways out of this mess is to consider every candidate on an individual basis. What are the merits? Penelope Beckles, Marvin Gonzalez, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, Roger Alexander, John Jarrett, well, is he a senator or an MP? All of the MPs, consider them on their merits. And then vote for whoever is the better candidate. Not whoever has the right logo, the right party affiliation. And if we started voting on the basis of candidates, that would send a message to political parties saying, oh, we can't just fart around and then put a Balize tie on a crapo and expect it to work. Or a Rising Sun shirt on a macaw and expect it to work. We have to put a little bit more thought into this, a little bit more thought in who we select, a little more thought about what we individually say. And maybe the gains would be minimal, but it would upset the status quo. And it would require us, if we want to do that, to put more thought into who we select, to pay more attention to what exactly they say, what they say right, what they say wrong, compare and contrast it properly with their peers, make a proper determination who is serious and who is blatantly corrupt or a waste of time. But we don't do this because, again, you could have a public call to put political loyalties aside for the good of some movement, for the good of some issue. And you have people within said issue saying, nah, I'm good. Because we get tempted into, because I believe a lot of people don't want what Edie Stewart is saying about the Nursing Association. They don't want it to happen to them. They don't want to be politically persecuted. They don't want to be on the outs. They want to have an easier economic life. And given the fact that our economy is in greater and greater trouble, the ability to facilitate that is potentially being reduced, which means some of you who are hoping to be politically aligned and by doing so get a better economic future for yourself and your family, you might be on the outside looking in no matter what you do. Because political loyalty ain't no objective thing that you could just accomplish. On some level, it's also subjective. It's at the whims of the party itself. There's no merit there. I have heard stories about people that have done a lot for the party they support and gotten nothing in return. And it's a joke. They're treated as a joke. They are a joke for the party membership. Some of them, it's a sad joke. It's not necessarily something that they like. And some of them, they're a joke. We'll just take everything we can get from them and then leave them by the wayside. Because that's how our politics are. And if that's how we want it to be, we will go nowhere. We will get nowhere. This is as good as it gets. Doesn't matter what the logo is. Doesn't matter which party it is. It'll be some version of this. If not this government, something similar to what we had before it. And that's the trajectory we're going. And essentially, when people say it's we time, what you're saying is, I'm fine. It's our time to get the crumbs. There's no prosperity here anymore. We're fighting over crumbs. You're fighting over crumbs. I'm trying to fight for an improvement in the prosperity of the country. You're fighting over crumbs. Let's open up the phone lines for whatever it's worth here. 15 minutes left to go. This bothers me, actually, because I've been alluding to it for a couple of weeks now. It bothers me. It bothers me that, and this is a continuation of commentary I made from the past, the lack of national identity. This is why it was so easy for the Independence Day celebrations to be cancelled. And yes, obviously the PNM won't do it because the PNM's history is tied to these things, so they can't do it. And the UNC's history is not tied to these things, so they do have some level of political motivation to distance themselves from it. Ain't that crazy that our national identity is also a tool for political games? You see similar things happen in America, where on one hand you have the Republicans looking as though they're taking advantage of patriotism, and on the other hand you have some liberal activists that are basically saying, oh, it's unethical to be patriotic to your own country. The American flag in America, there's something wrong with that, apparently. I mean, at what point is it going to happen here, where we're going to look at the national flag And that is going to be a divisive tool in our politics. We have a money line. Caller, good morning, you're on here. Caller?
Hi, good day. Sorry about that. Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
You know, I listening to you, and it's a good topic. It's a good topic you come with. Because you know, 2 days before the election, I was in Europe, you know, with Europe microphone now. We were in Europe, I and others, talking on the microphone about our party now, right? And look what happened. And again, I nearly get telling you like it is, because that topic bring back everything in me. I nearly get tear gas in the savannah. I was part of there. I was part of it. I was there too, right? We also delivered letters. I was part too. Delivered letters to the DPP because we didn't want the DPP to go to in that building in Park Street opposite ICNTT there. That glass building. We didn't want that thing. So we delivered letters there. Also in Express House. Also different places. I was there and look up and look today. Look today what's going on. You can't even get your pension, you know. Seeing that you bring out, you talking about it. It had to come out this morning. Yeah? You can't even get your pension on what you do. So watch me. My index finger, I have to concentrate and I have to watch it good and properly and know what I'm doing about that for the next time to come, the next election. I have to do that. You can't play fool and you just can't sit down and watch at things just so. You have to know what you're about to. Yes, and saying that, yesterday I hear the ASP, you know, he was talking about the bandits and whatnot. But I want to know, right? If a bandit, you know them bandits and them coming in your home and they coming to destroy you, them ain't coming to say thank you very much, you know. Them coming to kill and destroy, right? And thief whatever you have. So I want to know if a bandit come in your house and a bandit come and the bandit come in your house and they you know, some of them just assault you, some of them just beat you up, tie you up or whatnot, right? If a bandit come, say like my house, it's alleged, right? They come in my house and they tie me up and they beat me up, right? And I get the little strength to get something and knock them out, which I will get the strength to knock them out. What the ASP say now? You have to call the ambulance for them. That is what I hear the ASP say. But I want the ASP, I wanted them to answer that question. I wouldn't call the ambulance right away, you know. I will give the bandit when I knock out a bandit. And he on the ground bleeding, just like how they beating us up and we bleeding too. I will leave him there a little while. And I will have to get my strength back before I could call the ambulance. I will call them, but I will leave them there for a little while and see what will happen. That is what I want to say, because it's bandits and them come to destroy. They ain't come to tell you thank you. They come to kill and destroy. So you have to know what you're doing with them. And I have to get my thing in order. So when they come, I prepare for them, just like how they coming to prepare for you. And ready, I have to be ready for them. Thank you very much. Good topic this morning.
Thank you, caller. Although I run the risk of maybe disagreeing with you on the last thing, not fully. One of the things that the ASP said, he basically did cover the scenario, right? It shouldn't take much effort to, if you listen to what he said yesterday, to try to apply logic with regards to your scenario. If you're in a situation where you're tied up, you escape, you hit the bandit over the head, knock him out, right? Part of it is, yes, the law will understand that you are under a certain amount of emotional distress and it's not expecting you to act perfectly, right? It is asking you to act reasonably. Now, I would say this, the first thing you should do is call the police. Because you need, especially someone like you who's an elderly woman, you need assistance to ensure that this situation is over. So the sooner you get the police, the better. Now, technically speaking, the law says you do have a duty of care because you have to use reasonable force, right? And therefore, the medical situation they're under, you should reasonably ensure that they get the attention that they need. Now, I don't know if you have to separately call for an ambulance after you call for the police or if they would do it for you. I hope they would do it for you, right? Less things for you to be concerned about. But generally speaking, you can't just let someone die in your house. You can't open yourself up to liability because of that. I understand they are seen as a hostile entity and you don't want to necessarily do anything to help them. But unfortunately, this is the reality of, this is not medieval times, right? This is the reality of modern society. We do have a duty of care. I'll get into it a little bit more. We have San Fernando waiting. I don't want to make him wait any longer. We'll take the call now. San Fernando, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
All I would say to you is that comment by that lady from Arima is a reflection of the frustration of a lot of society.
Yeah.
A lot of society. And it's a little bit about wanting, you talk about a home invasion scenario, people just want their own justice, so to speak. That's what that was about. Not saying it right or it's wrong, but that's what it's about. I want to get back to this situation. Well, firstly, let me talk quickly about Mr. Alexander, the Homeland Security Minister's comments about the whereabouts of the commissioner and his continued ridiculous comments talking about if some people were asking that question, if they know where the children are. Total rubbish. But I don't think we expect anything different from that gentleman anymore. He is fully displaying his arrogance and stupid behavior. Let me say that. I want to get back to the comment that the person put up this morning about the person when they're talking about when you went on about Palestine and Israel. And I think you're a bit harsh on the comment of the texter. And let me say why. Okay, the texter talk about those 700,000 displaced Palestinians. He said previously. Those were his words, or his or her words. That's 700,000 displacement. I think he's talking about what they refer to as the Nakba, or the catastrophe.
Yeah.
When over 750,000 Palestinians were displaced in the 1948 War of Independence for Israel. This situation, Sean, with Palestine and Israel, and I could understand where the caller is coming from, or the texter is coming from, because of how long this thing has been going on. How long that, okay, you have a situation where your neighbor decided to invade your property. That is what happened. That is what happened. Prior to 1948, You need to go back to the Balfour Convention or the Balfour Declaration in 1917. It is a lot of history leading up to today, and what is, and he used the right term, the Zionists are doing. What the Zionists are doing. So don't try to say both of them bad, and even though one worse than one doing more to the other against the other. The Palestinians have been suffering since 1948 when the Israelis decided that they want their homeland, and what they have done since 1948, Sean. This is you have to understand where the caller is where the texter is coming from. He's not wrong. It hurts to understand the history of that area. Imagine you living in an area, you living in Gaza, or you living in the West Bank, and you can't leave when you want. You under pressure. They control your water, they control your electricity, they control your movements. Do you understand what that is? A lot of people look at it on the surface and see what happened when Hamas and looking at it through that narrow lens. It's a bigger picture than that, and this greater Israel situation. It is about extermination. Why I think Egypt closed the border? Egypt closed the border because they're not going to allow Israel to push the Palestinians into their country and take the land. This is not about just Egypt refusing to let Palestinians come in by them and take refugees. It's a bigger picture than that. That is Egypt's stance. Is to say to Israel, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. So we close the border. That is how this situation is upsetting.
Caller.
Why I think?
Caller, I have to ask.
The International Criminal Court, the ICC, have an arrest warrant for Netanyahu.
Yes, but caller, I have to ask this. Is the concern the land or the lives? Is the land a greater priority? Is the land of Gaza a greater priority compared to the lives of the Palestinians? I just have to ask.
In what context are you talking about?
Because if you say Egypt closed the border because they're not allowing Israel to push the people of Gaza into Egypt, my only issue with that is you're interpreting that as taking a principled stance. I'm interpreting that as Egypt saying, I don't care if you die, you're going to be speed bumps for the IDF, whether you like it or not.
No. That is not. It is not that simple.
They don't. Hold on. Yes, but caller.
It is not as if.
Caller, they don't have water. They have issues with food. And you're basically saying, we're here to help you by forcing you to remain in this situation. How is that ultimately aligned with ethics? And as far as I'm aware, I don't know to what extent goods and services are allowed to flow through the Egyptian border either, right? I don't know how freely goods gets through to Gaza from Egypt. I assume some does. Right?
Yes, it does. That's the only way. That's the only place it comes through right now. That is the only place it comes through.
But if there are no hospitals left, you can't take in people with medical conditions. There's no facilitation of anybody crossing the border. We're just going to say, oh, the old people, the children, you'll all have to stay there. Or they're bombing you. That's right. Stay there to defend your claim to land because that's more important than your life. I understand that you don't want... I understand that we don't want Israel to just rob the people of the land. That's why I said someone needed to go in. You can't just leave the civilian population of Palestine there and say, well, you all just hold on to the land. How is this a solution?
It is not about Sean, it's not about it. I understand where you're coming from. You know, you saying take the why you don't take them across by you? What happens when you take them across by you?
No,
Which they have been taken. Is millions of Palestinians have been displaced.
I'm also saying
a lot of them in Egypt.
I'm also saying
a lot of them in Syria. A lot of them in Lebanon.
I am not saying I actually am not saying that they should all leave Gaza. My solution was the international community needed to get in between, needed to enforce the borders. Because if the IDF is saying Hamas is attacking us, that's fine. We put well-armed peacekeepers and tell the IDF, we'll stop Hamas. You'll stand down and go home. But no one has the belly to do that, including, I mean, the Arab states aren't asking for that. No one's asking for that. I'm not saying that the people of Palestine should be displaced. I understand what it means when you have a couple million people just dumped on another country, right? But the status quo of just letting them stay where they are, and then we send strongly worded letters from the International Criminal Court and saying that's going to solve the problem, that's not a solution. Because they're still dying. So is the goal the land or their lives?
And it is not, it cannot be either or. That's what I'm saying. It cannot be just either or. Yeah.
Well, again, I have a suggestion.
Israel
I have a suggestion that doesn't pick.
This land,
yes, but
this
how
land
do you
belongs to these people?
But caller.
Yes,
How do you make them understand? They don't care about what we have to say. They've already been an international pariah in the history. They already were ostracized by America at one point in time. Us just saying it isn't going to make them understand. They have to understand. Why do they have to understand? If they face no consequence for what they're doing,
so then what you saying then just Egypt open the border, take all the Palestinians,
what I said was, if the UN was worth anything, if NATO was worth anything, particularly the EU, if the international community was worth anything, there would be an international well-armed force between Gaza and Israel, and basically telling the IDF, if you want to get through to them, you have to go through us, and that's the end of it. And if a shooting war occurs, but it will not be between national military versus a terrorist force and a civilian population who's going to get caught, obviously, in the crossfire and suffer the most because of it. It's going to be...
No, you understand how the UN works, right? And how the Security Council
Yes, I understand how it works. They just talk.
No, they just talk, Sean. The one obstacle in the United Nations in this fight is the United States of America. That's the one obstacle.
Caller, given the
because of how the UN is structured, once they vote, once they go against whatever resolution is taken, nothing happens.
Caller, given the history
probably
of
what
the
we need
UN,
to do is to break up the UN.
Caller, well,
and start something
potentially
new.
Yes, but given the history of the UN peacekeeping efforts have never been well armed and have never been that effective. And there's nothing in the history of the UN that suggests that the UN, even if America wasn't there, would have been able and ready to physically intervene in what's going on in the Middle East.
Well, and I agree with you, because the United Nations is a weak body. That is a paper tiger. Basically, that's what it is. It's a paper tiger. They allow few nations to dominate because what? This is the world. This is the world as it is. That doesn't say what Israel has done since 1948 and what the British done since World War I in that area is right. And just opening the border for the Palestinians to run across to Egypt is not right either.
I never said that Israel was right. I'm just saying.
I'm not saying you say that Israel is right, you know, Sean, but I'm saying,
but what I am
going back to what the texter said.
Right. What I am saying is, if your priority is preserving life, we could debate about the economic conditions of displacing 2 to 3 million people.
Egypt never said the priority was preserving life. That's not what they never said that.
Okay. All right then.
Egypt never said that.
All right then.
Egypt never said that. In 1967, during the 6-Day War, what happened then? Israel, the same thing they're trying to do in Gaza is what they did in what they now call the occupied territories. This is a very complex situation that you have to admire those Palestinian people who are still holding on in the West Bank and in Gaza. So we're still holding on.
Yeah, but
the issue with Hamas is a recent issue. Before Hamas, who they had there? They had Fatah was controlling. They had what's his name? Yasser Arafat. And what Israel did to Yasser Arafat, people, you forget what happened then? Where they bombed a compound and leave that one man inside there and leave him to suffer and die? When they knew he was sick, they knew he was diabetic, no medicine, they didn't allow them to. This is what they're up against. And still they're holding on to what they know is theirs, their land. And up to now, Israel does not want a two-state solution, because a two-state solution would solve all we're talking about here. We could exist and you could exist.
No, it won't.
But they don't want a two-state solution. What they want is greater Israel.
Caller, a two-state solution. Effectively, we've had. What would a two-state solution offer to change the status quo, to make it practical and peaceful?
Because a two-state solution would allow the Palestinians to now govern themselves, to now have a proper economy.
How does a two-state solution?
Right now, you know what's going on in do you understand what happened? Okay, prior to 3 years ago, right? Do you understand what the West Bank and Gaza is?
Yeah, but wait.
It is basically two camps. They have these people living in two camps.
Right, but how is it that these things, when you said that they could have an economy, they don't have an economy? They don't select their leaders?
They have Sean, it is, you have an economy, you have a domestic economy. Because the money coming, you know where the money comes from? Where the money was coming from? The money was coming from the other Arab states to give to fund them, to allow them to live.
So, right, yes, but here's the thing. With regards to a two-state solution, what will Gaza do? I can't speak to the West Bank. How will Gaza earn money? How will Gaza create an economy just by formally declaring a state of Palestine? That's what I'm asking. I'm asking, what's the practical effects? I understand the legal and the political effects, right? It will have now a legal sovereignty. It could engage with other nation states in a way that it might not be able to do right now. But on a practical level,
do you understand that committee that Donald Trump formed and the plans they have for the West Bank?
Caller. That's a separate point. You said a two-state solution will solve the thing. All right, okay.
The plans that they have for that area. It is about what? It is about tourism. So don't tell me that if it is that there's a separate Palestinian state that they can't develop an economy. Of course they can develop an economy. And all those Arab states that has been funding them before going to assist them in developing a country.
You're missing the point.
What is the point, Sean?
I'm saying practically, on a physical level, I understand the violence is in the way. right? Let's just, what is it about a two-state solution that's going to create peace and is going to add any practical physical means to generate an economy? Because you technically don't need a two-state solution for tourism, right? You technically don't. Also, a two-state solution...
Because the Palestinians don't live in a state. The Palestinians live in two camps, the West Bank camp and the Gaza camp.
Right.
That's
so then, so what you're saying is,
surrounded,
right?
They are controlled. They are controlled by checkpoints.
Stop. If you want to say that you need a state will then have a system of laws. The system of laws will then regulate how capital flows in and business is created. Fine. That's where a two-state solution will help the economy. If your concerns are with regards to the checkpoints and so forth, Israel will still have the capacity to have checkpoints along their borders. Egypt will still have the capacity
so then the Palestinians don't need to go. The Palestinians don't need to go in Israel. That's it. It can be. What you're saying, it's going to be a legitimate border where Israel is going to have to whatever laws the Palestinians pass for Israelis to come across by them, and the Israelis going to have the same thing. It is because it's going to be a border, an international border,
right?
Recognized by international law.
This is what I'm getting at. I'm getting not necessarily the border, but the fact that if you grow the economy, then there will be less need for Palestinians to go across the border. You're probably not going to eliminate it to zero. But these are the arguments as to how a two-state solution, from having a regulatory body, a framework of laws, potentially having a system of police, etc., 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 being more formally able to control and regulate things, etc., and then it leads to certain things. However, a two-state solution will not bring with it peace. In part, your own arguments with regards to Israel's agenda, why would Israel respect a two-state solution? You could declare it, you could ratify it, and then the violence will continue the next week.
And that is your assumption, right? If it is true, a true two-state solution where it has to be, Israel have to agree to it. That's the first thing. And if they agree to it, Sean, and there's a two-state solution, Israel have a part in Palestine, and there's a state of Palestine. So there's a country called Palestine and a country called Israel, and the Palestinians are allowed to do their own thing.
Israel has agreed.
Why it is that you think it can? Why it is that you think it will not a Palestinian state cannot exist alongside an Israeli state? Why are you saying that?
Because all you need is one gunman to give Israel what they would view as a legitimate excuse to go harm all over again. They will just wait for one moment of violence, and then they will say, you see, it doesn't work. And it will be it doesn't have to be big, it could be something small. And then Israel will say, you see, it doesn't work, we're going back to doing what we were doing.
So then basically, you saying, give Israel all the land, forget Palestine,
again,
then what you're saying? Because you're not allowing, you're not giving room in your discussion.
Paula, think about it. You are saying Israel wants to commit genocide. Why would a two-state solution stop them in the long run? Why? What about that is going to practically stop them?
Because, Sean, you remember what I said? What you just said the word, and let me say it to you, right? It is a two-state solution.
Caller.
You're trying to solve a problem.
Yes.
A solution.
Just because they say.
And if it's a solution, you have to give it a chance to see if it will succeed. Okay.
Caller,
not just saying from now. It wouldn't work. That's because that's what you're saying. It wouldn't work. Yeah. That's what you're saying.
Hold on. It's similar to what I.
You're not giving room for it to try.
Caller, it's similar to what I said. How is the economy going to improve? And then eventually we found reasons of how this will help the economy improve. in a vacuum, the two-state solution, when both sides are seemingly more than willing to fight, and one of those sides is seemingly more than willing to literally bomb the other side out of existence. Forgive me if I just think we'll just throw diplomacy at it, as we've always done, right? And so Russia agreed to Ukraine existing. Now all of a sudden, Ukraine is not a real country, and Russia's invading Ukraine.
So
just because it's on a piece of paper doesn't make it binding and permanent.
And I am not talking about just I am not just speaking about a resolution here, Sean. I am not speaking about a resolution. I am talking about a true two-state solution where, let me tell you something. You think if there's a two-state solution and there's a partition and Palestine is allowed to govern themselves, you think they will not get help? They will not get investment? You really think so?
No, it's not that, Caller, it's not that. I think that even if Israel says we agree to the two-state solution, they'll just wait for another excuse.
Okay, so you are saying what basically you're saying that a two-state solution will not solve the problem because Israel will not be a part of a two-state solution.
Right? Okay, without anything to compel peace. Beyond just paper, diplomacy, and whatever, and negotiations, it's probably not going to work, and I don't have faith that it will work.
Given a fair chance,
peace.
Given a fair chance, as to Palestine as a country will flourish.
Right.
Given a chance.
Except what's stopping Israel from committing more acts of violence? What will stop them?
You just can't be trained that outside there.
Why not? Literally,
because Israel might do this. That the two-state solution can't work.
You pointed to the history from since what, 1920 something, 1917?
1917, yes.
Right. It is a history of violence, caller.
Yeah, 1917 to 1940, it was a British-administered Palestine.
But it was still
talking about after 1940.
But even then,
prior to 1917, it was an Ottoman Empire.
Even then, caller, there was violence between Muslims and non-Muslims, and Christians and Jews. There was violence in the region.
Not what happened after 1948.
Yes, because yes, but that is not necessarily due to a lack of motivation. That is just because the means of violence changed.
Right. Let me just in conclusion by saying, given a chance of a two-state solution, Palestine, a country called Palestine, will flourish and be a country if given a chance. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
If given a chance.
Now, who is going to give them that chance? Who's preventing it now?
Well, that is the question, Sean. That is the issue.
So even if you want a two-state
solution, but you can't. I understand where you're coming from, but you can't just say it can't happen. You can't just live in doubt.
But caller,
you have to try and live in optimism.
Caller, I don't understand. You're literally just saying, look at how evil this situation is, but I'm going to be optimistic that the plucky heroes will figure out a way to negotiate a solution when all negotiation has failed.
You living in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah.
And you at the end of the day, every day what is the end your program by saying?
Which one? Allegiance to your country. I'm not doubting.
Why are you saying that? You know why you're saying that?
I am not doubting
because you always have a level of optimism that could be a better place, right?
We don't have a nation with significantly more firepower bombing us. I'm not saying the Palestinians can't do it. I'm saying what's going to stop the violence permanently? What's going to enforce peace permanently a two-state solution without the physical capacity to defend themselves, and that ain't going to be built up with foreign direct investment over the course of a couple of years, a two-state solution ain't going to matter if one side decides they want to continue violence. If Israel chooses violence, we'll just have people saying, oh my God, look how horrible it is. They're invading the nation of Palestine, as opposed to bombing the people of Palestine. It will just change the semantics.
I hear that, however, I prefer to live in optimism, not in pessimism. That is the idea.
But it's not realistic.
You can't see that, Sean. You can't see it.
Yes, I can. History says aggressors,
okay, yes, you could see it.
Aggressors are not going to just become peaceful. Maybe if an entire generation of Israeli leadership dies and a new generation, that's very unlikely given the emotional sentiments of the nation. There is nothing to suggest that an aggressor will no longer be an aggressor just because you ask them to. And that's what you're basically saying. There is nothing to compel them to stop aggression.
Let me just say this one. I hope it happens in your lifetime, because I go there before you.
Well, caller, let's put it this way. I hope
I hope in your lifetime we see
caller. Well, how about this? Do you have any optimism that the PNM and the UNC will start to govern better?
So that's a question, right?
No, but let's live in optimism. Let's just hope, right?
Yeah, yes,
no, but the thing is, realistically speaking, we need something to compel them to be better. They're not going to do it on their own.
Okay, well, I agree with you. I don't expect them to govern better.
Right, so why are we going to expect Israel to become peaceful?
What I expect is Trinidad and Tobago, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, someday to demand that the people that we put to govern the country govern it better.
Right. And that is
what I expect.
That is to compel them. And what I'm saying, and this is why I go back to what I think should be done, because this has gone on for far too long. If you want peace, something has to compel Israel to stop. And it's not going to be with a pen.
Well, probably we don't see it yet, but something somewhere along the line, son. As I said, I still live in hope that place could become a peaceful place.
I have no doubt the Palestinians could thrive. Because all people, if given a chance, could thrive. The violence has to end. And there's nothing to stop the violence.
So, and the fact that they are still there?
Let's put it this way. Well, let's put it this way. Israel has to agree to the two-state solution. So either you have to figure out a way to compel them to agree, or to compel them to not reinitiate the violence. Either way, there is nothing right now to compel them. And that's the problem.
And I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Right.
However, as I said, I still hope that someday it will have a state called Palestine, a country called Palestine, that can govern itself and live alongside a neighbor who will respect their statehood. I know. You have a good day, Sean. Nice discourse.
Thank you, caller.
Okay.
One thing, because I highlighted when this whole thing kicked off, there were people in Israel that had normal human relations with the people of Palestine, commercial, social relations with the people of Palestine. It can happen on that level. The problem is the higher levels, the decision makers. Now, with regards to the commenter, let me say this. My point was that currently, and I disagree with you here, currently, Egypt closed its borders. I understand Egypt doesn't want to take in all however many million Palestinians and to abandon Gaza. I understand that, but if the callers are talking about genocide and the concern is genocide, you have two practical options. Help the people escape or help the people defend themselves. And everybody chose neither option. And that was more or less my point, particularly the help the people escape. If you don't want to fight, because, hey, I'm not going to fight. I'm too old to enlist, right? I'm not necessarily looking to die for that cause. There are causes that I might be willing to die for, but we have our own problems, right? But if you believe in that and you are of military age, go help them defend themselves. Go stand in between. Someone has to do it because it's a civilian population versus a military 90% of the time, if not more. But if you're not willing to do that, at least then let the people escape. Are they there because they choose to be there? Those that wish to stay, that's fine. More power to them. I respect that. But can you tell me that they all choose to stay? And that was my point. My point is that the Middle East is saying, look how bad it is, but they are doing nothing, really, to do anything to change the status quo. And the commenter brought up the 700,000. That's way back when, which I didn't look it up at the time, but I suspected it to be. That is irrelevant to the point that I'm making now. And the point that I'm making now is no one is really doing anything practical to help Gaza. They're just saying how bad it is. They're just talking. But if the international community put its money where its mouth was, there would be a heavy peacekeeping force, not just guys with plastic hats and outdated APCs that are with paper-thin armor that's going to fold up on the first sight of a committed IDF attack. But a heavy presence, a heavy deployment of European and American and maybe even Asian troops, but particularly European and Middle Eastern. Well, Middle Eastern, that might cause a whole other political firestorm. European because it's perceived as a neutral third party. They have the personnel to do it. They could do it. Do they want to do it? No. On some level, the hypocrisy of the two situations it's reasonable to point out. The reason why there are not European troops in Ukraine is because of the threat of nuclear war. But they're still giving them military support. Why? Because the threat to Ukraine is a threat to their own security. Gaza, the threat to Gaza, no one has those stakes in that fight. It's all just politics. It's all just politics. And Israel is basically being allowed to do what they want because they don't care about the negative press. That's not enough to compel them. International condemnation is not enough to compel them. You could potentially sever their ties with America formally, with the American government. That probably won't be enough to compel them. They see things through their lenses, and they are not going to apologize for their point of view. So if you want to get them to stop, you need something strong to compel them. And diplomacy has proven to be not enough. Even Trump went and tried. And did that work? I don't think so. I don't know if you could take the comments. Yeah, Israel agreed to the eventual two-state solution. Listen, okay, let's go to the bottom one. Israel is not bombing Palestinians out of existence. I mean, yes, literally they're not, but at the same time, militarily speaking, what they're doing does not have much tactical value, to be honest. It does not. And if any other country, if any other Western democracy did something like this, the domestic press of that nation would be all over their government. Even the right-wing government Israel currently has not removed itself from the Oslo Accords. Yes, I understand, but international accords and treaties are not law. If no one looks to enforce them, and enforcement means there's no international police force that we have to all be subjected to that has an international monopoly on force. Let's take the next step. What will stop the violence is the de-radicalization of Palestinians. 84% of Palestinians hold anti-Semitic views and believe that Israel has no right to exist. Yeah, but how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you change a mindset? And the thing is, you know how do you grow the radicalization of Palestinians? This. This is how you do it. Even the American occupation of Iraq caused sentiments against America that for the most part didn't exist like how it was perceived to exist. Americans were dying in Iraq because they were getting in the way of the internal strife of Iraq. And because Iraq couldn't formulate a government and stabilize itself. And Americans were literally just in the way, and then they became the evil ones by default. When they toppled the Saddam Hussein regime, Iraqis were waving American flags left, right, and center because they wanted freedom. The aftermath was where things went wrong. Israel is not the aggressor and has not been. That's fine. I agree with that. That doesn't make them correct. That doesn't make what they're doing right. We spoke about stand your ground laws where you have to respond with reasonable force. This is not reasonable. And this is not a way to de-radicalize a population by literally bombing their society into a shell of its former self. What is Sean talking about? Israel already agreed to the two-state solution. We are not seeing it in action. Like I said, Russia, when the Soviet Union split up, everybody agreed Ukraine is a country. And now, what's happening? Russia is invading Ukraine. Why? There's a narrative out there that some Russians believe Ukraine is not a country. Russia saying that they were Nazis in Ukraine. All of a sudden, we're not hearing anymore talk about Nazis anymore. Just because a state says something doesn't mean that it's true. Doesn't mean that they're going to follow up with it. Doesn't mean that they're going to be bound to what they say. So has the Palestinian Authority. All right, well, if that's the case, why are they still fighting? And why hasn't the two-state solution been done already? If they both agree, think about it. They both agreed to it, right? I understand the basic premise. They both agreed to it, and yet it's not here. Why? What's stopping it? Obviously, it's not the international community saying, hold on, y'all can't have the two-state solution yet. Obviously, it's one or both of the two parties that agreed to it in the past. And again, if you have the two-state solution, and everyone acknowledge, well, you're acknowledging the radicalization of Palestinians, fine. You're saying that they both agreed to two-state solution. You're saying, okay, Israel is not the aggressor. But what's to stop some radicalized Palestinian to shoot up a bus, to bomb a school, or whatever, sell mortar rounds to a park, whatever, and then Israel is not going to be the aggressor, but the response is going to be more of the same, and then what difference does the two-state solution make? I actually said Israel wasn't the aggressor. I said they might have done things to instigate, but they didn't kick off the violence. But that doesn't mean that they are totally innocent. Did nothing to provoke, to continue provoking radicalization, whether it's non-violent means or, in the current situation, violent means. And again, this is a whole different perspective compared to the previous commenter and to Mr. San Fernando. And this is my point. It is way too complex. To say Israel is not the aggressor is an oversimplification. It is literally true, but it's still an oversimplification. To say that 700,000 Palestinians were displaced in the past, that has nothing to do with the now. To say that Egypt wants to prevent the Palestinians from abandoning Gaza, and they don't care about, I mean, that's the implication of what you said, Mr. Sanrano. They don't care about the lives of the Palestinians. That implication is really bad if you go to the eventual logic. So, I'm sorry, this is one of the reasons why I am of two positions. Either someone goes in and physically forces the violence to stop, or we just go somewhere else and disregard what's going on. But this sort of, I want to say fake concern, but that's not fair to everyone involved in the conversation. This sort of meaningless concern, and I understand to you it's not meaningless, but to me it's meaningless because it actually does nothing to affect a practical solution. It's not even championing a practical solution. It's just saying, we want the violence to end it now. History has shown they are both unwilling to end the violence. regardless of who does it at a larger scale than the other. As Mr. Sanders said, the UN is a paper tiger. The UN post-World War II understood they had a mission: prevent war, prevent nuclear war, prevent Armageddon. And they were made up of men and women with much sterner stuff because they saw what happened after 2 world wars. They witnessed it with their own eyes. We don't have that anymore. We've lost those generations. The leaders we have assume peace as our natural state of being and does not really know what to do with conflict and act like scared chickens when it comes to having anything to do with making a real decision on meaningful issues that have grave consequences. It's easy to talk about immigration into America and into Europe, and look how brave we are and how many refugees we take. But when it comes to, oh wait, someone in Africa is killing their neighbors, or someone in the Middle East is killing their neighbors, or all of a sudden we're ineffectual. I wonder why. Because easy times make weak men, and weak men right now are what's running the world. I'm fairly certain something like this probably, Israel wasn't quite this naked in its aggression. I doubt something like this could have existed quite like this blatantly back in 1948, all of those conflicts notwithstanding. Actually, no, I take it back. I take it back. It could have happened. It could have happened because the state of the world, it would have flown on the radar. I take it back. I apologize. I take that back. Anyway, I've gone way over time, so let's end this here. It is an interesting conversation. I just think, what's the solution? The two-state solution, 2 different sides, perspectives, is pointing to that. I don't see it. I'm sorry. Because what's going to compel them? What's going to compel our local politicians? You need to put something to compel them, not just ask them and hope for the best. That's my position. So, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And you know what? Don't just remember it. Do something about it. Put your money where your mouth is if you're a Trinbagonian first and a member of some other entity within the country second. Do something about it. It's nice to be nice. I appreciate the fact that the conversation did not evolve into a full-out argument today. So, kudos to that. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN. WESN.
Welcome back to Dollars and Cents. Now, in this episode, I would like to talk about a topic that is very dear to me, the topic of financial literacy. And I'm of the firm belief that financial literacy is not spoken enough in the school system. And as a result, you know the old adage in Trinidad and Tobago, you go to school, do good in school, get a good job, and then basically that's the end of most of the guidance that you will get from parents and the persons who are guiding you as a child moving forward. And after it is you get a job or a stable job in Trinidad and Tobago. Now in most cases when people say a stable job is either a government job or if it is one of the 4 big professions, engineer, doctor, lawyer, and what's the next one? What's the next one? Engineer?
Doctor, lawyer, engineer is only be 3 sometimes.
Right, engineer, doctor, lawyer, right? And when it is you get those jobs, essentially that's the end of your guidance and you basically have to figure life out afterwards, right? Today I have a guest, Jared West-Mitchell, and we'll be discussing essentially the idea behind financial literacy and as it ties into financial planning. Now, Jared, I will allow you to do your own introduction, but